Hello everybody, hope you can see me and of course indeed hear me. Hi Laura, I can see that you're on. Do let me know when I come through, hopefully loud and clear. Hi Catherine, can you hear me? Can you see me okay? See and hear me well. Thank you Tish for letting me know. So we are about. Hello Michelle, thank you for your support. Always most grateful, and to you Leslie as well. Hello Kathy, always lovely to have you on. Thank you. Happy Father's Day to any other fathers that are on. You sure I'm coming through okay, hearing wise? Looks and sounds great, fantastic. Okay, then I think what we'll do is we'll get straight on with things. Hello Kirill, because we're on at 7 o'clock, and I've got a football match in an hour. England are playing, so don't want to be late for that. So consequently, let us move straight on, and we're going to be talking today about the Micklegate area, and I wanted to make kind of sense of the Micklegate ward. So I thought we would start here. Show you, obviously, unfortunately, Harris fencing, but to show you we're starting here on the edge of the Knavesmire. So the racecourse buildings just kind of in front, in the middle of our pitch. We'll get a little bit of zoom. You should be able to see the kind of the racecourse sort of set up down there. Hello, David. So this is kind of where we are at the top end of Knavesmire. Another reason for us to start here is there's a recently installed memorial here to a chap by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Bertram Best Dunkley, who lived hereabouts, who led his men bravely into battle. He was an acting lieutenant colonel on the 31st of July 1917, which was the first day of the Battle of Passchendaele in Ypres, third Battle of Ypres. And despite later dying of his wounds, during the day he managed to lead his soldiers gallantly through heavy machine gun fire to a position of safety. So he was awarded the Victoria Cross, you can see under here, for valour. So very few war graves have this, VC meaning for valour. So the highest military accolade that anybody can receive, and generally speaking, to receive one means that you've been killed in action. So we're going to walk up Tadcaster Road, come through the mount, my favourite, cute as a button, the old gamekeeper's cottage here, recently put up for sale by the council, but how cute is that? So I really want to just kind of say, give you a whole sense of this, take you some places we've not been before, tell you some stories that we've not heard before, and hopefully make you think, oh, it's not just another exercise going in York, we actually see it here and learn some new stuff. So we're going to cross this road when we can. So we're coming at Tadcaster Road, and if you remember when we were at the nature reserve, I was talking about the moraine, the raised platform. Well, the moraine, which is a kind of glacial sort of build-up, runs the length of this road. It's what created the road into York. A raised bit with wetlands kind of either side. Remember what Askham Bog was like? Very, very wet. So consequently, the building sort of hugs very, very closely to this road historically and goes right the way back to the Roman era. Though, of course, we are looking right now at early Victorian, late Georgian buildings. And I'm just going to cross over because the very first building I want to talk about is very, very near to here. And it's going to be some Roman history. But I hope you're enjoying the weather. It's the first sunshine, really. We've had sustained sunshine of the weekend. We've had a very, very wet week. And frankly, we're a bit sick of the rain, so it's jolly nice to get out and about with some blue skies and to allow us to kind of take in just the sheer loveliness of this area. And I'm afraid it's one of those that if you have to ask the price around here, you probably can't afford it. This is some of the sort of desirable areas of York, but just going to sit back and enjoy the view. So we're going to be starting our tour today outside of these elegant townhouses. The address is number 6 Driffield Terrace. We're going to see it in a minute. It's part of a kind of very fine Victorian terrace that dates from 1860, and that's kind of in common. Most of the buildings along here are Victorian. There's one or two kind of modern ones over on my kind of left-hand side, but most of the buildings you're going to encounter for the next few minutes are Victorian. But they're also incredibly grand, because this was, of course, the area where any self-respecting industrialist or landed gentleman of property, or indeed perhaps a widow of wealth, would want to be located. This was the kind of the Des Res postcodes of its day. So most of the properties that you look at are terribly grand indeed. And it is, you know, kind of reflective, if you like, of York being, of course, the county town of Yorkshire. So this is a place where you'd want to do building. And of course, when you're looking at the other side of these buildings, you're talking about vistas going right the way across the Knavesmire down towards the river. And much of the building that's happened subsequently wouldn't have happened at that stage. So consequently, you can imagine you building huge villas with bottomless wallets and of course wonderful kind of views. So the house we're going to talk about is in this row over here. And I say it was built originally around 1860. But the story, which takes us back much further, begins with a most remarkable find. And it all began with a site redevelopment project here at number 6, which is the middle one, the grey one with the shutters down. I'm not sure how much we can see from this side. You probably see better from the other side. Where do you get a bottomless wallet? You usually inherit it. Inherited wealth is far and away the best way. Ask Donald Trump how to become a successful billionaire, and I would say be born into the family of one is probably the proven route over and over again to getting that kind of status. So we can't see much from this side, so I think we'll go around the other side. Yes, he's hugely successful, isn't it? It makes you wonder at what point he realised he had what it took to inherit a fortune. But there we go. So it begins normally enough with a redevelopment project here that revealed evidence of skeletal remains. Now, of course, once skeletal remains come to light, there's of course needs to be a coroner to make sure there's nothing dodgy gone on. Once it's been established the skeletons were not evidence of a crime, but from many centuries ago, the police gave way to the archaeologists, and the excavation began in earnest in 2004. And the archaeologists were so intrigued by the evidence that further investigation was needed. And research continues to this day, really, to uncover more about who these men were, where they came from, and how they died, questioning whether they were criminals, soldiers, slaves, or get this, gladiators. So we knew that ancient skeletons discovered in the garden dated from the Roman times. So this is the row here. So we saw the front of it a minute ago, now you're looking at it from the street side. And thanks to the work of the archaeologists, we know that many of the skeletons were of men who lived violent lives and died violent deaths. So altogether, archaeology exhumed 80 skeletons from the gardens of 6 Driffield Terrace after their discovery in 2004. And 60 of them were mostly complete. And the remains have been dated to between the early 2nd and the late 4th century AD. So they seem to cover most of the Roman period of occupation of northern Britain. So in this remarkable photograph I'm going to show you now, this was obviously midway through. They were brought to York's historic Guildhall and laid out. Now how amazing is that? You're looking there at some of the bodies of these suspected gladiators laid out in York's medieval Guildhall. I mean, there just seems to be an augustness about that. There seems to be a real respect. It is absolutely amazing image, don't you think? It kind of really speaks to me, does that image. So what we know is that, so we're going to walk on in a minute, but it is really cool, isn't it? You just take them for a minute. It's like, these are Roman soldiers, Roman gladiators, whatever they may be. We'll talk about that in a sec. Let me get rid of that for you. So bodies, sort of Roman burial sites in British cities are by no means unusual, and the graves were standard in kind of many respects. There were certain features, however, that made the burials stand out. So firstly, 75 of the skeletons were male, adult males, which is an unusual kind of demographic for Roman times. So there's no female, there's no older males, for instance. And the bodies were around 2 centimetres taller than the average height for a Roman British period. The skeletons also showed that the men were not only tall, but kind of well-developed individuals, bearing a kind of range of healed and unhealed injuries that could have only been inflicted violently. So previous forensic work led to the theory that some of the remains might have been Roman gladiators. One of the skeletons bore a large carnivore bite mark, probably inflicted by a lion, a tiger, or a bear. You know, in the Colosseum type thing, yeah? Several more had their heads cut off, either when they were still alive or shortly after they died. So the grave goods accompanied many bodies, and there was also evidence of mourning, as many of the graves contained evidence of funeral feasts. One man was buried with the remains of joints of meat from 4 horses, cows, and pigs. Other graves bear evidence of feasting after the burial. And actually this kind of corresponds with Roman custom, where friends and family of the dead visited graves on important anniversaries to share a meal. They do that in Mexico, don't they? There's kind of belief that you can have and certainly on All Saints days and so forth. So it kind of chimes with a lot of kind of Catholic belief systems, which is kind of interesting. And the demographics of the graveyard and the build of the men and the evidence of kind of violence on the bones led archaeologists to believe the cemetery may be the best preserved gladiator cemetery in the world. Now, various other theories are also considered. So 45 of the skeletons show signs of decapitation, indicating execution and suggesting the possibility that the men were convicts. But it's unlikely criminals would have been awarded such respectable burials. Okay? So the possibility that the men were soldiers executed in the aftermath of Caracalla's coup in 2011 AD is definitely another possibility. It's been a theory. However, the graveyard's long period of use kind of dispels this. The fact that all from sort of 200-year period really kind of undermines the fact that they could have been all killed at the same time. Also, kind of along the fact that men buried came from all over the empire rather than just one region, which is usual for soldiers of the same unit. So the theory is by no means proven, but the evidence is compelling. The discovery of gladiator burials in Ephesus, which is now modern-day Turkey, in 2007, displaying similar injuries to those of the York, and the fact that decapitation after defeat was a means of dispatching fallen gladiators makes it even more compelling. So gladiators were known to form guilds to take care of the funeral arrangements of their fallen comrades. So this would explain the respectable burials awarded to the men. I've got a picture here, a carving from nearby Ephesus. As you can see, a Roman portrayal there of gladiators. And gladiators were sort of a high caste. They may have been sort of soldiers vanquished in combat. They may have actually committed some crimes, but once they attained the status of gladiator in whatever role they played, they kind of went up a level, they gained honour, and the ultimate honour, of course, was kind of through death. So whilst they may have been decapitated, this may well have been part of the guarantee to dispatch them through to the next life with that honour intact. So, you know, we mustn't kind of read too much into the treatment of these bodies to suspect that this was anything other than a noble death for a kind of warrior. But obviously, a very violent and dangerous kind of pastime to be, or form of employment, should we say. So it now seems that amongst reputed experts, there's a consensus that these men were gladiators. Now, one more extraordinary fact has been revealed, which is where they came from in the ensuing time since 2004. So to make the discovery, specialist kind of archaeologists applied what you call cutting-edge techniques. Basically, genome technology, a crossover, more fabulous building right here, to 7 of the skeletons. And it's kind of the next step up from DNA analysis. And this technique enabled them to determine the origins of whose sample genomes were similar to an earlier Iron Age woman from Melton, East Yorkshire. They showed poor childhood health, which suggests they were locals who'd endured childhood stress. But their robust skeletons and healed trauma suggest they were used to wielding weapons. This, by the way, is the Mount School, one of York's many independent schools, school for girls. Very, very high quality education if you've got the pockets deep enough. And one of the decapitated Romans had an even more extraordinary story to tell. So, hope you're not too squeamish. It's a skeleton, but here is what a decapitated gladiator looks like in a burial pit, which I think you'll find is really quite sort of chilling, isn't it, in many respects? But this is how they were found. Unbelievable. I mean, you think York is just a gift that keeps on giving in terms of giving up its history and kind of sharing with us what was there. So we know he's from the Middle East, growing up in a region of modern-day Palestine, Jordan or Syria, before migrating to Britain and meeting his death in York. And this means he was from the same region as the gladiator bodies discovered in Ephesus. So I mentioned Ephesus a minute ago, where obviously there had been the comparable sort of burial pits for gladiators, or burial sites rather, which put them on in the first place. And in case you're wondering kind of where Ephesus is, again, let me bring up a map for you. Where did I put that? Oh, I'm not sure I've done that. But anyway, sorry, I don't think I've loaded that. But anyway, Ephesus is in that kind of same area, so what you might call the Eastern Mediterranean. So you kind of obviously you sort of follow the coast round, and you've got what would have been Syria, Jordan, Palestine, kind of in that period now, mostly modern day Israel in there as well. So it's very much the kind of same neck of the woods. So it's pretty much as you would imagine. So the York Archaeological Trust said this new genome analysis was a huge step forward in understanding populations, migration patterns, and how people moved around the ancient world. So it's kind of hugely exciting, pioneering work that's going to set a new standard for understanding the origins of skeletons in the future. And as the kind of field grows and the cost of this work, this investigation falls, we're able to find out even more about where these bodies came from and sort of pinpoint them to an even smaller kind of region. It's a really remarkable advance. So the Roman skeletons that were sampled were all under 45. Most had evidence of decapitation. Spinal breakage is difficult to know, obviously, whether that happened post-mortem or during life, or rather at the point of death. But most, as they decapitated, it could have been putting them into the burial. They broke the spine, who knows. They were taller than average for Roman Britain and displayed evidence of significant trauma, potentially related to interpersonal violence, of fighting. And all but one would have had brown eyes and black or brown hair, but one had distinctive blue eyes and blonde hair, similar to the Anglo-Saxon look. And they did a facial kind of reconstruction, which again is, have I got it on here? Yeah. It's not kind of amazing, but it's interesting to be able to look upon effectively the face of a guy that was killed in combat as a gladiator, probably the best part of 1,500 years plus years ago, and discovered quite by chance in the garden of 6 Driffield Terrace here in York. It is absolutely astounding. I kind of love this story. I've never shared it with you before. So the demographic profile of the York skeletons resembles the population structure in a Roman burial ground believed before the gladiators at Ephesus. So that is the kind of parallel that we've got. I don't know how they can tell the eye colour, but presumably the York Archaeological Trust have said they can. So, but it also fits the kind of military context. The Roman army had a minimum recruitment height, and fallen soldiers matched the age profile and height profile in the York Cemetery. So either which way round, even if they aren't gladiators, which I think most people now tend to agree that they were certainly of the military warrior caste. So there we go. Quite a surprise. I think you'll find it, I suppose you expected to find that in your back garden. The bodies of 80 Roman gladiators. They're probably the best preserved Roman gladiator cemetery, we believe, anywhere in Europe. So going down Holgate Road now. I'm going to cut down through a lovely street that I actually adore, Mount Parade in York, because this area around here, what we know is that all around the gates and so the extramural area, as they might call it, was where they were used for burying of the dead. In the 18th and 19th centuries, when these buildings, these kind of very, very fine sort of Victorian, Georgian buildings were kind of being put in, there was lots and lots of discoveries. And of course, what they found were kind of tombstones, altars, stone and brick kind of burial chambers from the Roman era. Were found here in this road, in this street. It's not really a road because you can't drive down it. It's a beautiful alley, which is Mount Parade, which links Holgate Road behind us, which was once a Roman road to Aldborough. And this can link us back onto Tadcaster Road, so we're back on the Mount. But isn't it glorious? So when they were sort of digging this out in 1823, again, they found lots and lots of evidence of Roman kind of cremation. So all around this area was pretty much designated as the place where people would be interred. And it was right at the edge of the city. Now, I'm not entirely sure what it is within the kind of Roman belief system that meant that they would look to bury people, on the edges of the city. But it's certainly a factor, and it's been shown over and over again within the kind of archaeological investigations of Roman cities. And just to kind of make you aware, so where is this, Julie? This is Mount Parade. So if we caught Julie out for the first time, Julie is normally our York spotter. But this is sort of a lovely alleyway that links us, say, from Holgate Road to the Mount. Absolutely glorious. And for those that are interested in such things, I had a look because I thought someone was bound to ask, and the average property price last year for sale was 865,000 down here. So it happens at Pompeii too, absolutely trist. Yeah, so a lot of these things now have been established for so long, if you like, in our body of knowledge in Roman civilizations that we no longer have to question these or say, is this a York thing? No, it's a Roman thing. Because what the Romans did was they created a blueprint and they replicated that wherever they went kind of thereafter. So consequently, you don't have a kind of a York. We passed the end back 5 minutes ago on our way to yes, so that's 5 minutes away. You don't have a kind of Anglo-British reflection here. It's purely kind of how the Romans established their cities and how they designated elements of it. But isn't that beautiful? I think that is absolutely delightful. So as I say, this was a Roman burial ground around here. So the Mount now obviously a very leafy suburb with a good number of very grand Victorian houses and attractive terraces like the one we've just seen here. And it's kind of remained a desirable place to live because the high number of houses with gardens and the proximity of very good schools, both independent and state sector. The schools around here are extremely good. My daughter has just finished one of them, a Millthorpe School under the Academy Trust, very good school just near here. So obviously these things kind of really help. But obviously, first and foremost, you're looking at the proximity of York and the quality of the housing stock, which really is quite remarkable quality. And so we're walking up through Micklegate Ward. Micklegate Bar is in front of us. Before we do so, we're going to explore one or two other bits that we've not seen before on these tours. I hope you're enjoying the aesthetic of this tour. I find it endlessly delightful looking at these super fine buildings and telling you a bit, of course, about the origins in the Roman city. So this, of course, was the main thoroughfare. The Tadcaster Road, the road between York and Tadcaster, Calcaria, which we went to a few weeks ago, is kind of to the west, and that is about 11-12 miles in that kind of direction. We're now going to go across onto Scarcroft Road. If I can get across here, that'll be fantastic. I want to show you some of Scarcroft Park, which is, thank you very much, how kind. So just go, oh, I thought right, so that's us across the road. Let me have a little drink. Do you know, Linda, I think exactly the same. The kind of the Brooklyn and New York brownstones have got a very, very similar, I think, elegant feel. They're perhaps a little bit more uniform in terms of. Well, we're in Micklegate Ward, Julie. This is the connection. This is Micklegate Ward. We're exploring the historic Micklegate Ward. So, yeah, very, very similar, I think, in the elegant style of the brownstones, but I'd say a little bit more higgledy-piggledy insofar as that they were commissioned by individuals to their tastes rather than entire rows at a time. But anyway, let us push on. So, Scarcroft Road. So this area, as I say, is far under Des Res, really, and if Leslie Ram's on, you might recognise the park we're about to walk through, because Leslie met the one and only Humphrey in this very park. It's very near to my holiday let nearby, so in case you're wondering where we are. And the reason we're kind of heading down here is to talk about the idea of quarters. So this area around here, obviously distinctly more suburban than most of the conservation area of the historic York core. But nonetheless, I thought it was kind of interesting to explore, rather than just simply taking you down Micklegate, to explore the Micklegate Ward. So during kind of much of the medieval period, the kind of land outside the city would have been open, common and agricultural land. So in other words, people were farming it, you'd have kind of lords of the manor and so forth. There were some structures I'll tell you about in a little bit on a kind of way back towards the Mount, some of the interesting buildings that were there. And But what's kind of interesting is if we talk about quarters, I think it's one of those overused terms to describe parts of cities that is pretty naff insofar as that, for the most part, there's generally more quarters than four. Or even worse, you're trying to draw some lazy parallel with kind of Parisian Latin quarters or beautiful places elsewhere. So I'd normally kind of shy away from using the word quarter. But in the Micklegate quarter, it's actually completely accurate and fair to describe it, because historically York was cut into four wards: Micklegate, Bootham, Walmgate and Monk, which, as I'm sure many of you will have spotted and been aware of, that is precisely the names of the four gateways that we have in York. And each of the wards had what is known as a stray. So Micklegate Stray is one of the largest, and it goes right the way down to Bishopthorpe, down by the river, at the bottom of the Knavesmire, of course the racecourse where we started off, getting that view right the way across. But it also comes up here. It has Hobmoor, which is near where I live, is part of the Micklegate Stray, but also the Scarcroft allotments over in front of us to the right hand side, and Scarcroft Park. So it's a very, very large piece of what was once pasture land, a place where people could have grazed their animals. Largely, of course, because the drainage wasn't great, so it wasn't that good for arable land. But of course, what you call the enclosures did for that. So the enclosures were basically, in the 18th and 19th century, legal restrictions that were placed upon the common man being able to access common pasture land for his animals for free. So thereafter, a charge was applicable. You have to pay to get in. So this, as I say, this is the park where Leslie met Humphrey. And see if you want to come to York and meet Humphrey, we'll meet you here. So this is part of Micklegate Stray. So this is why, when Julie says, what's this to do with Micklegate, is we're walking within the confines of the historic Micklegate ward. This is Micklegate Stray, which, as I say, also encompasses the Knavesmire, Hobmoor, and of course Scarcroft Park. And a very fine building is now in our horizons, built by Walter Brearley, and this is Scarcroft Primary School, another extremely good school. And one of the wonderful things about it is it's a totally sort of symmetrical build. Done here in York, he designed the York Library, York Central Library, Goddard's, the wonderful National Trust House, the home of the Terry family. But this Nicholas Pevsner declared to be his masterpiece. Now, Pevsner you might not have heard of. He was a kind of German art historian who basically catalogued all the fine buildings in the UK, county by county. So he's like the go-to expert of his day. And he kind of declared that this was Walter Brearley's masterpiece. And it opened in 1896, I believe. There was originally, there'd been a school across the other side on Nunnery Lane, but it was needed to grow. And it opened with the capacity for 1,200 pupils. But actually the first intake, I think, was about 175, so it was a long, long way short of that. And we're talking about 15 years to get up to 1,000 pupils. But early on, this was both a secondary school and a primary school combined. And what it's got, which I think is absolutely delightful, is it's still got the it's an amazing place for Humphrey. There should be, shouldn't there? On this spot, just around here, was a Humphrey and his Auntie Leslie met for the first time. But don't you think this is glorious? This is an absolutely stunning building. Yes, I've been on Goddard's on many occasions, Julie. The home of Noel Terry, who of course was the head of the Terry clan, Terry's Chocolate. We'll be talking about chocolate on World Chocolate Day on the 7th of July, so get that in your diary. What I love about this, of course, not only is it fabulous, it takes us back to an era where we would have a boys' entrance, and of course, got a boys' entrance. Equally, we must have a girls' entrance. So I'll kind of show you that on that side. And of course, you know, when we're looking at these kind of buildings around here, with it being a very affluent area that were being kind of rebuilt in the Victorian era for professional people who had wealth and means. Obviously, none of it's been cleared because it was always successful, but it meant obviously that these were children of professional classes of York that were being educated here. So consequently, I think that's reflected in the quality of the buildings, and it really is quite fantastic. So we see the boys' entrance. Let's take you around to see the girls' entrance before I'll take you and see a nearby street, East Mount Terrace. We'll walk our way back up to the Mount, Micklegate Bar and so forth, more familiar territory for you. But I hope you have enjoyed this deviation into the kind of residential neighbourhoods, because I think there's so much of York to see, so much that the tourists very, very rarely see, that is just majestic. It's just on the edge of the city centre, but people don't know to come here. So I thought I'd show you instead. So here we have, on this side, the girls' entrance. So how nice is that? So Leslie's school entrance, boys and girls entrance, built in 1900. Well, this is about 5 years old, Leslie. I think it opened in 1896. Lovely blue sky against that. So isn't it just absolutely something? So as I say, this this area was very much for the well-to-do. And we'll be going in the wrong direction, really, Bishy Road. So we're going to head this way towards Micklegate Bar. But another day. That's not a no, it's just a not today, Julie. So this is East Mount Road. So again, built, I think in the around 1860, and houses for the kind of town professionals, as you can imagine. You know, so the people of wealth and means. They could have been doctors, they could have been solicitors, possibly teachers, but you're professionals. This kind of emerging professional class in the Victorian era. So around this time, much, of course, of the city had been cleared, or rather, subsequently, a lot of it was cleared because of slums. Because these were built of very, very high quality in the first place, there's been no slum clearance. So we can look, you know, at a street such as this, which is absolutely complete, and know that we're looking, in fact, at something that is utterly unchanged from Victorian era, which, you know, obviously the streets in London and elsewhere. But it's always nice when you see an integrity, and we talk so much, obviously, about the higgledy-piggledy nature of York. So by contrast, it's nice for us to be able to sort of look at something that has been built with one purpose in mind, to create uniformity, elegance, kind of repetition, and so forth. I think certainly senior railway workers, Julie, probably the surveyors, the architects, the lead engineers certainly would have lived in properties like this. Obviously, the more sort of lower, earning ones, probably more to kind of down South Bank. But everything is very grand. You've got lovely porticos over the doors and so forth. So let's just head on. So we're coming towards Micklegate and the Mount, because we're coming back up now towards the Micklegate Bar, which I'm going to recognise in just a minute. So let me just get myself a little drink. How are we doing for time? So East Mount Road, not cheap, as I'm sure you're not greatly surprised to find out, but very, very nice. And you're talking to a 4-storey with attics, but very rare cellars, by the way, in case you wondered. We don't really have cellars in York because the flooding, the high water level. Chocolate workers is possible, Susan. Again, those within the kind of professional classes. So, of course, the chocolate workers being so largely employed, you know, people on administrative and managerial sides, they would have afforded properties of this kind of calibre. But I am doing a chocolate tour, yes, on the 7th of July. I found out it's World Chocolate Day. I thought, how can we not have a tour from the chocolate city on Chocolate Day? So that's indeed what we do. So was St Catherine's Hospital, which dates back to the 14th century. We know that in the year of 1333, it offered protection to male lepers. It was a hospital that was built for lepers. Isn't that cool, huh? I think by the 16th century, obviously leprosy kind of fallen away, and almshouses were here instead. It was demolished in 1833, and that was somewhere on the site looking ahead of us. So again, on the edge of the city, this is where lepers are. So you can imagine coming in, so we're now coming back up to the main road, you're coming in and you're visiting the city. There's every chance that you'd have been assailed by a crowd of beggars. But of course, you know, lepers actually were held to be of quite high status, because it was felt that they were having their penance on earth rather than the next life. So actually, there was a degree to which lepers were not only welcomed, but very much kind of endorsed. And finding a way to support lepers was a great way for Catholics to earn brownie points. So there you go, in case you ever wondered. But of course, they'd have to find ways of kind of cleaning the coins. Now, what we know is that the original Roman road actually ran directly behind this lovely Art Deco building in front of us, which is now the Everyman Cinema, but historically, of course, was the Odeon. And do we know, by the way, the source of the name Odeon? I found this out a while back, and every time I tell people that, they're amazed, because hardly anybody seems to know this. So if anybody knows without Googling, stick your hand up. If not, I'll tell you in just 1 second. They almost tried to pull this down not so long ago, but 15, 20 years ago, which is just dumb because we've got so few Art Deco 1930s buildings. So I'm delighted they kept it. Odeon sold it. Everyman got rid, and wanted to get rid of the sign, or rather just get rid of it, keep the E. You were told you can't do that, so they only light up the E now. But it actually stands for an early cinema or an early picture house entrepreneur by the name of Oscar Daintz. And it stood for Oscar Daintz Entertains Our Nation. So Odeon is a word composite made up to the glory of Oscar Daintz, a man who saw the value in picture houses very, very young. So now to do with Odon. So we're coming towards the Bar Convent. Unfortunately, the Bar Convent right now is somewhat covered in scaffolding, so it's not the best time to kind of look at it. But by the way, there's also down here and again it's no longer visible, but yeah, the Chapel of St James, which was the place where incoming Archbishops of York would begin their walk on foot to the cathedral on their way to being enthroned. Right, it was a chantry chapel, so it closed down with suppression. So obviously when you get the close down the monasteries. But the dean and chapter would meet the archbishop here for the formalities. After being sprinkled with holy water, he'd put off his shoes and walk barefoot from here to the minster, which is a good, sort of 20-minute walk. So, not easy. So it just sort of shows that humility. But it was also interestingly used as the burial place for executed felons. Tyburn is not so far away. So the corpses of executed felons were put down there in the vaults. They were discovered in the 18th century. We know that at least one of them didn't make that final journey, because when he arrived, they found he was still alive. And so they said, well, you can go. And so he was executed. He'd been hanged, but because he'd survived the hanging, it was seen he'd served his penance, and he was free to go. So there you go. So the cafe in the Bar Convent, absolutely wonderful place to go. And at the Bar Convent right now, by the way, so the Bar Convent, I know you can't kind of see much of it, so I'm not going to sort of say too much about it. But basically, initially it was set up in secret. It was a time of great kind of Catholic repression. You weren't allowed to be a Catholic in England. You certainly weren't allowed to educate Catholics. So it kind of set up as a kind of subterfuge and was built in this way. In fact, it's got inside it a hidden chapel. Many of you, I'm sure, will remember we did the York Unlocked, when it then met the wonderful Sister Anne. Do you remember that? And you remember the fabulous internal columns. Let me just bring up a picture if I've got that with me. I did do a tour of that, I absolutely did. And I've got a picture of the interior of the chapel here. And it's got basically a dome internally, because they wanted a dome on the outside, but that would have kind of given the game away. There was a secret Catholic chapel inside. So consequently, this is, this was kind of the next best thing they could do. And so it's all looking rather fabulous at the minute, because it's all having a big facelift. So let me just get rid of that so you can see. So they're just painting the door. So it's looking fabadabby. And there's also a campaign, because this is, as you see here, Mary Ward for Saints. So Mary Ward founded the Congregation of Jesus, who are the sisters that live here under Sister Anne. They are parts of the Congregation of Jesus. And consequently, there's a campaign to have her made a saint. She was made venerable, I believe, in 1986. So she's already on her way, this is called beatification, they call it in the Catholic Church. So consequently, she's already kind of well on her way, and they're leading now a campaign on the basis that she was an absolute kind of pioneer. So she was born in the 1570s. I've got a picture here of Mary Ward. And she's a lovely, kind of wonderful, kind of really, really inspiring lady. She was kind of committed to the education of girls. She couldn't see any reason why girls should be treated differently to boys, which of course at that time was a kind of really, really different and kind of difficult sort of attitude to take. That it simply wasn't a kind of mainstream perspective to believe that girls should be educated. So kind of Mary Ward obviously set up with the congregation of Jesus with this aspiration in mind. And as a kind of result of this, there is now a move by the Bar Convent, by others, to have Mary to be made a saint. So there's a campaign on. And if you remember our wonderful kind of Sister Anne, she is one of the leading sort of commentators within this, which I think is absolutely fabulous. There's a picture of Sister Anne. I'm just waiting for this light to go, so I'll show you. Have I got that up? Oh, no, I haven't. But anyway, I used to have. There we are. Remember Sister Anne? She's absolutely lovely. Actually, there she is with Mary Ward's cross. So she is, as I say, she's the Mother Superior behind us, which is in the Bar Convent, which is absolutely amazing. And we're soon the football kickoff, so it's getting quieter and quieter on the streets, which is kind of fabulous. So she is definitely part of this, and I really hope they get it. I think it'll be absolutely fabulous. So Nunnery Lane, yeah, we're absolutely on Nunnery Lane right now. So let me get rid of Sister Anne. Formerly known as Baggergate Lane, so this is Nunnery Lane. So yeah, my holding is at the bottom of this street down here. So we've got a station over on our kind of left-hand side, and of course Micklegate Bar in front of us. So I say she was born in 1585, was Mary Ward, and I think we're okay to cross. An absolute pioneer in the education of girls. So let's hope, fingers crossed, that they get their way. So we've talked lots and lots about Micklegate Bar, so I don't figure that we need to sort of dwell too much on it, other than to say, of course, this was the point of arrival. So what we've done is weaved our way around Tadcaster Road, the road to kind of Calcaria, and so this now would be a point of arrival. We kind of started off half a mile sort of down there, and we've now got up to the gateway, the Royal Gateway, but also the gate, if you like, that was facing southern England and the west as well from kind of Tadcaster. So this is where you'd come, where you'd arrive if you're a person of means, to be greeted, if your status warranted it, of course, here by the Civic Party, by the Mayor, and so forth. And of course, if you're the monarch, as I've told you before, you had to request permission to come in, because York had a liberty, had its own freedoms granted in a charter 800 years ago. So it's customary for the Civic Party to meet the Royal Party just here, and for the Royal Party to request entrance. And it's also customary on the first time of asking, the answer will be no. I'm sorry, you can't. But then thereafter, you'd allow them kind of free passage into the city. And that's what happened when King Charles came here with the then Queen Consort, now Queen Camilla, early of last year, which again, we did a live tour to kind of cover that. So as we pass into the city, we're kind of coming in now to the edge of the colony. So I said all that area was on the outskirts of the Roman fortress. So we're now moving inside. And I've got a kind of picture here, with illustration obviously. So that being the river, you can see at the top of your picture there, the sort of rectangular bit is the fortress of Eberacum. This is what the archaeologists believe kind of looks like. And that pretty much sits over the footprint of what today is the Minster. On the other side of the river, or on the central parts where the Minster is, you've got the Colonia. So a Colonia is basically a Roman settlement, and it started off as a place for retired soldiers. So basically, for whatever reason, soldiers either had come from sort of so far overseas, didn't want to come home, or they were from this area, whatever it may be, they could retire here. So a Colonia was like a retirement community for Roman soldiers. And that's what this dominated the kind of top edge of the city. And this is the area now we're coming into of the quarter of Holy Trinity. It's a major church we think dates all the way back to Roman times, or the building, of course, now not like as old as that. But everything around here kind of relates to that. So we pass a pub just behind the scaffolding here called the Priory. Next to it is Priory Street, and this fabulous set of buildings that you've seen on a number of occasions, but let's go and feast our eyes on them again. again part of the property portfolio of Holy Trinity. They were the homes for clerics and date back to the early part of the kind of 15th century. So Holy Trinity was founded before the Norman conquest and is recorded in 1066 as a church dedicated to Christ Church, supported by a community of secular priests or canons. So many of those would have lived hereabouts. And it's listed as one of the 5 great northern churches, together with the minsters of Beverley, Durham, Ripon and York Minster. So that's the kind of pedigree, the platform it was put upon. It's kind of right at the top. And it was exempt from paying customary dues to either the king or the earl. So it really suggests this was a kind of cut above this church. In around 1089, the church was refounded by its new Norman lord as a Benedictine priory. In other words, monks that were following the laws of St. Benedict, who, as we've talked about before, was a 6th century Italian monk. But being a priory meant it belonged to an abbey church elsewhere. So there's a community of monks here, and around this time, the construction begins on the church that's here today. So it seemed to always combine a place of worship for the monastic community, but also a kind of secular home for the lay community. So in other words, a place you come and take communion. There's very little, by the way, of kind of evidence of the fabric of the kind of pre or immediate sort of post-conquest church, because obviously what we look at today, and we can't get in because the gates are shut, but from what you can see, oh, look at the umbrellas, that's nice, isn't it? It's an unusual sculpture, not seen that before. Is related to the monastic community that once lived here, the monks, the Benedictine monks. And inside, it's well worth coming and visiting. Fabulous exhibition on the monks of Micklegate, the Benedictine order, and so forth. So this is a kind of really interesting. And we don't quite know the precise date of the founding of this collegiate Christ Church, but the precinct occupies a large site. And at the highest and most central point of this kind of walled community, mirrors the position of the minster. So if you're going to look across the river, you've sort of almost got like a mirror image between Holy Trinity and the minster, which is kind of interesting. And these were the only 2 collegiate churches in the city before the Norman conquest. I'm going to show you another pre-Norman church in a minute. So both occupied sites of great importance in the Roman town plan. The minster at the centre of the former walled garrison, and the Christ Church at the centre of the prosperous civilian town, the Colonia, which was the site of administration for the Roman province of Britannia Inferior. So if it was freezing, I'm moving, so hopefully we'll get going in just a second. And so we're coming now to Trinity Lane. So again, this is all part of the footprint of the Holy Trinity Priory. And we have one of my favourite buildings in York, which is the Jacob's Well. It's a Grade 1 medieval listed building in the Micklegate area of York, and it's the church hall of the Holy Trinity, Micklegate. So the architecture, it was originally built as a hall house, consisting of a hall rising to kind of full 2-storey. It would have had a wing originally at the other end, but no evidence of this layout survives. So the house is timber framed, with the ground floor infilled in medieval brick. So basically, it is. Can you go across the street and see that shop next to the alleyway? I don't know what you mean, sorry. But I'll go across to the side of the road. So what we know is infilled. Originally, this would have been similar to the top, but it's been refilled later with brickwork, as you might say. So you know the top half is a lot more, if not authentic, and original than the bottom. So it's jettied, which we know is all about avoidance of property taxes, whereby the upper stories of a house stuck out. The reason being is you paid a property tax, a ground rent, on how much ground floor space you occupied. So consequently, jetted houses were incredibly popular. And thankfully, its wonderful 15th century canopy has been repaired because there was damage done to it. And I think they've done ever such a good job. I'll show you in a second. This is the original. When I say original, it's not at all. This actually came from a pub in Davygate. So a 15th century canopy, but it was moved here. So happened quite a lot in York, actually, stuff moving from one place to another. But unfortunately, it got smashed off by a lorry driver not so long back this side. So as you can see, they've have to repair on that, which is pretty good. Done really, really good. So I'm just going to move backwards, and so you can see this is kind of Jacob's Well. It's been a pub. It was originally the home for Isabella Ward. So she was a nun. There are some apocryphal stories about Isabella Ward being slain by Cromwell's, Thomas Cromwell, the guy in charge of closing the monasteries, because she wouldn't let them kind of pass in because this was a small convent. But we think that's absolute rubbish because there's records of her living here after that time, paying the rent of 1 rose per year, which is a beautiful way of paying your rent, isn't it? 1 rose per year. It's kind of peppercorn rent. So we think that pretty much that story is baloney, of being killed on the doorstep. But you'll see it from time to time in the more excitable coverage of York's history. Even if it's not bloody enough, they just like to inject some of these stories in, but some of them are just plain nonsense. So Isabella Ward kind of lived here, but it's been a pub, it's been a community centre, you name it, and it's kind of widely used to this day. But I say it was one of the buildings of the Trinity, as was this church over here. So let me just take you around here. So we think it was built originally about 1474, somewhere around that, as lodgings for kind of chantry priest. So you just got basically a series of buildings in this area. Thank you so much for liking, for tipping, for commenting, for subscribing. That's what I want, a subscription drive at the minute. So if you're not already, please do subscribe. You hit the button underneath the screen and it should say subscribe. And stay subscribed as well. There's nothing worse than the number going up and then going down again. Very dispiriting. So some sort of later Victorian industrial buildings, but I want to take you to see a church just around this corner. One of my favourite churches in York, and I can't remember if we've been, I think I might have brought you here once on a Hago tour, but certainly not in recent times. You can see the streets are deserted out. England in the kick-off of their football in a few short minutes from now. So consequently the streets are pretty deserted. Which is good, it's exactly what I wanted it to be. And the weather's nice and lovely and blue. So we're coming to the area from Bishop Hill, and I want to show you the Church of Bishop Hill Senior. St Mary, so named after St Mary, of course, the Virgin Mary, there's this tower just over here. And I think you'll probably remember, because I've told you a number of times, the Normans, under William the Conqueror, had his harrying of the north in 1067, rather. Once they'd basically taken York, conquered 1069, and conquered York, they then levelled it and burned it to the ground. And there's only one building that substantially survived, and that is the building we're going to see over here, which is fabulous. So everything else in York from that period, prior to the harrying of the north, was completely destroyed, whereas the tower of this church survived. It dates from about 1000 AD, so from the Viking period of occupation of the city. What's super cool and interesting is even though it dates from the Viking period, it's largely built with Roman stone. So consequently, what that means is that it was kind of a bit of a recycling project by the Vikings. They found lots and lots of stone around for from obviously the remains of the Viking fortress, and they used it to build that tower. So isn't that fabulous? So it's an Anglo-Saxon tower, a Viking tower, dating from about 1000 AD. And you can see it's very kind of rough stone. It's not built with kind of symmetrical, even stones. It's very much kind of composite of bits and pieces. So I love that. And the fact it sort of survived, it's the only bit of York that survived, as you say, William the Bastard doing his worst. It's lovely. So the rebuilding of York, if you like, starts here, right here on this spot. There'd been, if you like, the death of the old city, and now we get the beginnings of the new one. And talking about death, there's a grave that I'm just looking for that unfortunately looks to be very much kind of covered over. So I'm just going to see if I can kind of get to it to you. But I think we've been meadowing and wilding to such a degree that we're going to struggle to see it, because I think it is around here. It's one of these. I'm just looking for it. I haven't been down here for a while. But it basically commemorates, in case you're wondering why I want to talk about it. Look how long this is, by the way, because this is kind of this wilding fashion that's kind of going on these days. But there's so many children's graves that we still see in these graveyards. So at the top here, we've got a confectioner, so appropriate for the chocolate tour, who died in 1806, aged 41, and his wife, who died aged 43. But also we've got a son here that died aged 2, and another son that died here aged 11. And almost every grave in this graveyard picks up and kind of mentions the death of children. I'm just looking to another one here who died at age 11, another who died at the age of 15. And of course, so much of this is to do with the fact that there was no sort of clean water. And here we are, this is what I was looking for. So this is the grave that dates from 1797. And it says, in memory of 2 sons and 2 daughters of James and Hannah Patterson, who died as infants. So 4 children, 4 babies of the same family that all died as babies. But it's the rhyme, the verse, if you like, that really kind of gets me. It's an interesting way of thinking about death. It says, happy the babes who, privileged by fate, to shorter labour and a lighter weight, received but yesterday the gift of breath, ordered tomorrow to return to death. So I find it kind of fascinating, that kind of presentation. I mean, whether in some ways that kind of makes and helps the parents to think about death that way, but seeing life, seeing sort of infant mortality and death as being sort of saved from how awful life could be. So get a lighter way, isn't it? It's such a strange way of thinking about it. And of course we're now sort of conditioned, to having children that sort of survive. But through this period of kind of infant mortality, so when most of these grand houses were being built, the reason that I thought I'd tell you this is looking. You've seen some of the finest houses in York, some of the homes of those august citizens, but not one of those citizens would have been protected, okay, from the shadow of the graveyard because of the diseases. Because of childbirth, women, of course, as we know, so many women would die in kind of childbirth. But the contagion, the choleras, the typhoids, the smallpox, the TB, the sweating sicknesses, all these kind of diseases that just will be conveyed within urban environments, that even for the wealthy that could kind of wrap themselves up in the big houses, they're still coming in contact with people that are, from congested areas. But of course, there's no clean water. And so it's kind of interesting that on the one side you've got this kind of city, area, Micklegate I've kind of shown you, of great luxury, but it's also a place, of death, where nobody, no matter how wealthy and privileged, can be spared from this kind of very, very short lifestyles, high numbers of children dying, because ultimately you haven't got sanitation. So you can have whatever grandeur you want, but unless you can couple it with fresh water, sanitation, modern medical treatments and so forth, then it's going to mean that your life of quality, your life of luxury, is also going to be one of sadness. And it sort of makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether the fact that infant mortality was so high, did people become conditioned to it? Did they get used to it? Was that the norm? It doesn't suggest so to me in that rhyme. It suggests that there is a kind of bitter unhappiness of having lost 4 children in that way that's due to kind of mark it straight. Hello, Pete Kilban, Deputy Leader of York and a superstar on the political scene.
I was running home to catch the kick-off.
Me too. Cheers, mate. That's Pete, he's one of the good guys running York. So it's just always, I think, good to think, just to measure against luxury and sadness. So we're coming down to the bottom of Micklegate now, which is an appropriate place for us to kind of wrap up, because the river is where the old Micklegate ward would finish. And so consequently we walked a good amount of the length of the Micklegate ward. Not quite all of it, but we've covered a great deal of it. And hopefully along the way you've seen some very fine buildings. You've been interested and intrigued by some of the stories, the 80 gladiators, leper houses, stories of monks, royal entrances. It's not bad to say we haven't been at the city centre. That really kind of starts over there. If people talk about coming to York, they tend to mean going further than we've gone. We haven't gone anywhere in what you might call the centre of York. But I do hope that you feel that here, by the parish of St Martin cum Gregory, one of York's fine medieval churches and now the stained glass centre, that you've seen more than enough to warrant a tour of York. So I'm going to be walking back up, so do by all means stop on the tour as I walk my way back up towards where I'm kind of parked, and I really enjoyed that. So hopefully we're now going to be seeing England 16. There's fantastic buildings all the way along here. Former St Margaret School for Girls. Another building up here, a chap called Joseph Hansom, you may have heard of. It's the Hansom cab, the very kind of taxi that kind of dominated cities in London and across Europe. He was born and lived here in York. I'll show you his house that we'll pass just in a minute. But anybody who was anybody would have had a house on Micklegate. So Micklegate being Great Street. Gosh, of course we know the Nordic word for street, Mickle meaning great. So this is the street of the great and the good, the rich and the powerful. And I think it shows in the quality of the architecture, the luxuriousness of the houses, the grandeur of the churches. And it is for me probably one of my favourite areas of York. And I've really enjoyed taking you to see some residential areas, seeing the wonderful school by Walter Brearley, because I think that York has so much more to offer than simply the city centre. Wonderful as it is a city of tremendous riches, and sometimes it's only by getting actually slightly out of the city centre that you can really kind of take on board the variety and the quality of what's on offer. So I think this has kind of really worked as a tour. I'm delighted to have brought you here, but this, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, is where I'm going to leave you, because I'm now going to trot back to my car fast as I can to get back and watch football. So thank you everybody for your wonderful support. Thank you everybody who makes a contribution. It is so useful. Obviously it takes time to kind of research and plan and work these things out. It's not simply a case of just stepping out and opening your mouth and just saying stuff. I like to have material kind of prepared, so it is incredibly helpful to support those that are able to that provide. So thank you everybody that does so, and I look forward to speaking to you very, very soon. And put your date in your diary, the 7th of July, 5 p.m, World Chocolate Day. We are doing a tour to talk all about York's wonderful chocolate history. So you will need chocolate by your side while you watch it. There's going to be certain points along the tour where we're all going to collectively stuff our faces with chocolate, or whatever else that you like. But hopefully you all like chocolate. So thank you everybody. We're here at Micklegate Bar, appropriate place for us to say bon voyage, see you soon, thank you very much, and signing out. So I'll just give you a little wave and say thank you everybody from York. It's been an absolute pleasure as ever, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.